So our series up to this point has been about the differences between qual and quant. And now I want to talk about bringing them together. And again, I just want to emphasize that up until pretty recently in marketing research, putting qual and quant together in the same study or the same series of studies isn't necessarily a popular idea that's been proven over time. In fact, it's really because quantitative research has become so much easier with computerization, and qualitative research has become so much easier with techniques that can speed up the process through computer tools, that you can even begin to want to merge these two things together. Because traditionally, both of them required such specialization, so much computation, or just structured analysis, that it would have been really, really hard to bridge these two together and to get anything usable within a reasonable amount of time. Today, however, I do qual and quant projects all the time, and they don't take me that much longer to do than just doing one or the other, because of all the tools that we have at our disposal. So the good news is, first of all, qual and quant can work together. And part of that, too, I think, is particularly in the field of marketing research, is that many marketing researchers are trained in both. Traditionally, the fields of research, people came from one discipline or the other, but marketing researchers today learn about both, just as you're learning about both in this class. And that means that we're a little bit better suited to bring them together and use what I'd call a hybrid approach. So a couple of different ways that you can combine qual and quant. One is to use multi-phase approaches. And by the way, your textbook refers to this, I believe, as mixed mode research. We can call it hybrid, we can call it Quali-Quant, we can call it mixed method. They're all the same description of the same idea, which is combining qual and quant in some way. So multi-phase qual and quant is one way of looking at things, where what we do is we have a study that's broken into different pieces, and we say, okay, we're going to have a qualitative phase and we're going to have a quantitative phase, and they're both going to have similar lines of questioning, but the qualitative phase is going to be more open-ended lines of questioning that are geared at understanding what 10 or 20 people have to say, and the quantitative phase is going to be all close-ended questioning, where we're going to hear what 200 to 300 people have to say. That might be an example. So what's nice about that approach is that you get your context, you get your background, you get your quotes, you get your individual opinions from the qualitative side of things, but then you also have some numbers to go with it that you've measured from a quantitative sample that you can use to look more broadly at the population and at the groups and at the comparisons that you want to make. It's very useful. Where that tends to be difficult to do is often that it requires a larger budget than client organizations often want to put into one project, because conducting two different styles of research requires two different sets of interviews, two different sets of analysis, reports that have to be bridged together, so it can be difficult to do that. So another approach is to use that qualitative phase as a pilot study. And a pilot study is where you're testing out your survey instrument before you go out to the broader group. And so what you can do is you can do a qualitative phase where you conduct maybe 10 or 20 interviews, and you have your questions all ready to go, but you don't necessarily have all of the answers figured out for what those questions are going to be, and you can see how people tend to respond to those questions in open-ended fashion, and then use that to refine your quantitative survey instrument. So that's kind of a nice, easier way to combine qual and quant without breaking the budget. There's also just what I tend to call Quali-Quant approaches, and that's where you build a single research process to use both qual and quant together. So one thing that I often do in my research is that I do a lot of satisfaction studies with business-to-business folks. So again, business-to-business means that I have a small population. They're people that I can't survey very often because they get annoyed if they do too many surveys. So I have to make sure that when we interview them, it counts and that we get the information that we need. So I'll have them rate things on a scale. I'll say on a scale of 1 to 10, tell me how you feel about communication during this process. And then we follow up with a probe. If they answer a 9 or a 10, which we have found to be a very high score, then we ask them, well, why did things go so well? And if they give us an 8 or below, then we ask them, well, what could have been done better? And that approach is really cool because it helps us to understand what those numbers meant to them. And it also helps us to verify whether or not an 8 is a good number or a bad number. So on a 10-point scale, many of us are used to a grading scale, very similar to what we use in college, and a 9 or a 10 is an A and an 8 is a B. So that tends to be how people rate on a 10-point scale. We need to know that. We need to know if an 8 is great or if an 8 is just good and it could be better. And we can achieve that by having qualitative probes. We can also ask questions. I often use the SWOT analysis format: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and ask questions centered around that. And then we can take the quantitative data and form what we call categories and themes that talk about the big picture ideas for, what are the strengths summarized, things like they're communicative, or they're responsive to us, or they answer the phones when we call, or things like that. What are the weaknesses? Well, they don't listen to us, or, well, they don't give us the information that we need when we ask for it, things like that. We can summarize that, and then we can use that down the road for further quantitative studies that we might conduct in follow-up to see if those themes are still true or not. So there's all kinds of neat ways that you can combine these two styles of research, and it's really, most of the time, just about being open to new and different ways to ask questions rather than just trying to follow a traditional process. Now, granted, you guys are just learning how to conduct research, and that's why in this class we're mainly going to focus on quantitative. Because qualitative, as cool as it is, it requires a little bit more training and a little bit more experience than you're going to be able to get in just this class alone. With that said, though, if you ever get a chance to learn more about qualitative research, I highly recommend it. I think you'll find it very worthwhile, and I think you'll find that combining these two approaches ultimately will give you the best possible data.